Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to, first of all, thank the organizers for inviting me to this important conference. And I'm very impressed by the level of the participation and being in this lovely historic room. I have always had a very warm feeling for Denmark and for Scandinavian countries as a whole, as countries which have very orderly, civilized, domestic arrangements, and have always been in favor of peace and reconciliation internationally. And of course, they are known as the lands of free speech. But of course, free speech is useless if we don't use it. And free speech means that we must debate issues, especially important issues, and be open and blunt, even to the point of being provocative. Just about 10 years ago, almost exactly this month, at the start of the new millennium and the new century, 189 heads of states got together at the United Nations and they signed a declaration, the Millennium Declaration, which called for cutting in half the global poverty, preserving our ecosystems and habitats, ensuring universal primary education, protecting human rights, and last but not least, eradicating the scourge of war. Sadly, shortly after that period, we had the barbaric attacks on 9/11, followed by the so-called War on Terror. During the past year alone, we have experienced unprecedented economic problems since the Second World War, near collapse of the banking system, and the failure of the Copenhagen Forum. We have seen increase in poverty, corruption in public life, and the continuing tragedy of war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, lately Yemen, and God forbid, maybe in Iran, and so on and so forth. War seems to have a momentum of its own. I think most of us in Europe do not quite comprehend the importance of the shock of 9/11 to the Americans. They were sheltered in their fortress behind two great oceans. And this was the very first time since their independence that they were attacked on their mainland. Seeing that terrible sight of people jumping from the 100th floor, whatever it was, of buildings, was enough to keep all of us mesmerized by this spectacle. It has seared itself into a new world. But of course, for many of us in Europe and the Middle East, sadly, this simply was another tragic occurrence. In Europe, we had the two devastating world wars with over 50 million killed in the last war. The Blitz in London and Coventry, the firebombing of Dresden, the firebombing of Tokyo, the use of nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For the Middle East, the tragedy started with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire after the First World War, when the whole empire collapsed, and the countries of the region were cut into pieces and ruled by various European countries. The end of the caliphate, the end of the empire, the end of stability, and then the Second World War. In the past 2 decades or so, we have had an 8-year-long war in Iran, between Iran and Iraq, where 1 million people were killed. There was a Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and even domestically, the terrorist activities in various European countries. In Britain, where I live, the IRA cost the lives of more than 3,000 people, and the near destruction of the entire British cabinet in one terrorist act. So while, of course, accepting that this event was very traumatic for the Americans, we have to come and realize that as far as the world is concerned, tragedies have been ongoing for a very long time. When President Obama came to power, of course, he was caught between a rock and a hard place, or if you like, between Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was also caught between 2 other major problems. He was caught between his own constituency, the liberals who had voted him to power, and were expecting change that we can believe in. We can do it. And of course, the establishment, the military-industrial new complex, where hundreds, I mean, last year I was looking at a figure, something like $370-odd billion of military contracts to American firms. The establishment, the Pentagon, the Congress, the newcomers. So one of the first things he did was to escalate the war in Afghanistan. Within weeks of coming to power, he doubled the number of American forces. And then he also, 3 days after coming to power, he started or intensified drone attacks in Pakistan. There have already been about 10 drone attacks this year alone, in the past month. According to Pakistanis, there were 44 drone attacks in 2009, killing over 708 people. According to Pakistanis, only 8 of them, 8 out of 700 and odd, were terrorists. One drone attack on a madrasa in Bajor agency, in the FATA, the federally administered area, killed 84 people, including 68 children. The father of one of those children put a suicide bomb on himself, a belt, went and exploded himself in an army camp, killing 50 Pakistani soldiers. At the end of December, less than a month ago, a Jordanian doctor, Human Khalil Abu Malal al-Balawi, wearing an explosive belt, went to the headquarters of the local area of CIA, killed 7 CIA operatives, including the head of the section, as well as a leading Jordanian CIA intelligence operative, and many more. This gives rise to a few questions. First of all, what on earth are Jordanian intelligence people doing in Afghanistan? And the man who was his handler was a relative of the king and the royal family. Secondly, 2 of the CIA operatives were contractors, members of the Blackwater. What on earth are they doing as active members of the CIA? And thirdly, and most sadly, is that it shows really that even with such a huge organization like the CIA, the 16 American intelligence organizations together get a budget of nearly $100 billion, which is more than the military spending of any other country except the United States. if this is what they can produce,